Thank you, Caroline, for the warm meet and invite. And nice to meet everyone. It's such a pleasure getting to talk to you all on diversity and inclusion. Um, my name is Jessica Simpson. So I currently work as a senior healthcare practice manager at Clark Construction slash S2N Construction Group, S2N Technology Group. So Clark Construction owns S2N Technology. S2N Technology is like a subsidiary of Clark, one of 8 subsidiaries. So each of the subsidiaries have like a specialization that they focus on, right? So my technology group focuses on technology, making sure that we have the right equipment for hospitals, buildings, like the Smith African American Museum of Art, Museum of the Bible. Those are like some of our previous projects, and even with at John Hopkins, there was I think it was, I don't remember the exact name, but there was a John Hopkins like hospital that we built. I guess it was 2015 or 20. I have the dates mixed up. So I'm new to S2N as a senior healthcare practice manager. Before that, I worked at Booz Allen Hamilton as a healthcare management consultant. So whilst there, I was contracted within Booz Allen to the Department of Defense, where I worked as a deployment lead. So for the program executive office for the DIMSM program, it's a long breakdown, but basically our responsibility was to make sure that in each military treatment facility, we're supposed to deploy Cerner software, which is an EHR, electronic health record software in each of the MTFs. So it was a great learning experience. I really enjoyed it. And S2N just happened to be like something that I was interested in, and it seemed like it was challenging, right? Because it was like focusing on healthcare, but your specialization was with new construction, new buildings, even with existing buildings like renovations and making sure they have the right technology in place. So it was an entirely new thing to me. So that was one reason why I went to S2N. And before that, I worked as a clinical engineer at University of Maryland for 4 years. So I believe my experience there taught me a lot about healthcare. Um, Back in the day when I was in college, I wanted to go to med school, but then there was like a gap where I realized like I wasn't as passionate about um, like biology. I loved biology, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't as passionate about going to medical school. I was more passionate about like trying to improve like healthcare systems. Like I was more passionate about that. So in my grad program, I was teaching undergraduate human anatomy and physiology classes, and I was working as a CNA. So I guess like it gave me some form of like clinical experience. And whilst I was there, I always wanted to like improve the patient experience in the hospital. So that was like one thing that really geared me towards like consulting in general. Um, Before, I guess like yeah, that's like a summary. So my background is in systems engineering, public health, biomedical science, and yeah, it's been a great learning process. It's been a difficult process, but it's been great. And I'm really excited to share my experience with you all.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That's very
You're
interesting.
welcome.
Can you like tell us a little bit more about like how you pivoted from the engineering side to the consulting field?
So engineering kind of like guides you, it gives you like an open perspective and creates like this form of inquisitiveness in you where you want to find out why do things work the way they do, right? So the systems engineering program at Hopkins taught you like made you look at things from a systems perspective, right? How things like how departments are supposed to be connected to each other and not just work on independently, because when they communicate with each other, their processes are synced, it improves the overall system. So thinking about it in the human body, like you have your heart, right? Your heart has a different function, your brain has a different function, but then they all work together to make sure your body is in sync, right? So that was like, I feel like the engineering aspect produces this sort of inquisitiveness, and it also makes you learn a lot of skills. Example, like in writing school, I learned more about generating like system requirements, like learning to ask the right questions to get to the root cause of a situation. So yeah, there's so many things that engineering teaches you. So I'm really excited that you guys are all in this program, and I know you're learning a lot.
So thank you. So I was wondering if there were any particular skills that you picked up like during your grad school that you later found like very interesting or very useful when you went into consulting.
So learning like for research, like even with white papers, right? Making sure you have the right sources. So again, I'll lean it back to research, making sure like you know how to research the right things, because everybody can do research, but then engineering and grad school taught you how to like look for the right things, right? And then also it taught you how to work collaboratively with each other, even like because even in your school, like you meet people from different backgrounds, so it taught you how to work together with a capstone project. It gave you an idea of how the real world might work, right? On like even different end of how do you call end of school projects, right? So those things help me gather those skills, right, to be good in my role, both right my current role and my previous role at Booz Allen. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, so these problem solving skills and like looking for the answers and trying to
Yes.
find out reasons. Okay, we get it. Yeah. Oh, that's what we do the most, I think, as engineers.
Yeah. So problem solving, that's a good skill. Yeah.
So even when you started working as a consultant, was it these problem solving skills that helped you the most, like looking and trying to find the reasons behind the problems that you
I'm
had?
sorry. I feel like I need to probably use my headphones because I can't hear you, but give me 1 second. Okay, let me go grab it. I'll be
Yeah, sure.
right back.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Caroline.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm pretty sure that we have a lot of aspiring consultants with us in this group. So I was wondering if you could tell us when you started preparing for these case interviews, when you wanted to be a consultant, and how long did that preparation phase last before you started appearing for those interviews?
How long it took for me to, I'm sorry,
To
I think
prepare.
I don't know, for some reason, terrible. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. What was the
So
question again?
yeah, the question was about how long it took for you to prepare for the case interviews before you started appearing for them. And how was that preparation phase? How did you effectively prepare for them?
So the case interviews, like every job differs, right? Is different, right? So like typically, like if I would apply for a job, for instance, at Booz Allen, and they tell you within like a week, you do first do a phone interview, right? And after the phone interview, you have to meet the team and they ask you questions. So it takes like maybe depending on how long they schedule it out, maybe they take like 2 weeks for the interview dates with a team, right? So with that, like maybe the week before, right? Maybe the 2 weeks before, I just skim things online, right? Questions like popular interview questions that people might ask. Um, a week before, I start writing out down like potential questions, and then I try to remember like any experiences I've had, even if it's like through an internship. Those are all valuable and those count towards your work experience, right? So tell me about a time that you worked with a difficult coworker, stuff like that, right? So like situational questions, like sometimes consultants tend to ask a lot of situational questions, especially if you're starting, if you're new to consulting, they're not going to throw like really hard questions to like deter you, right? They're going to ask you questions that show that will indicate that you are proactive, like you're inquisitive, like you ask the right questions, you're like capable of fulfilling the job, right? So just make sure you, when you're doing your research, you find questions that tailor towards that. And then it took me like 5 days, literally. Like I would try to like break it down, because sometimes I get easily distracted. So I'll like break it down to like maybe 30 minutes a day, right? And then the day before the interview, like also look over it and then try to rehearse, right? You should have like an elevator pitch. When someone asks you, tell me about yourself. What drives you to do what you do? What motivates you to have even done what you previously did, right? Even with engineering, what's your story, you know? And you own that story. Your story, you might feel like your story is different because you're from a different background, but own it, celebrate it. That's the reason why you're different, and you should really be happy about that, because it gives you a different perspective. You should be proud about it because it gives you a different perspective on solving issues, and it makes you an asset to the team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the concept of like celebrating the differences, because since we are the part of diversity, equity, and inclusion team, I was wondering like what it means to you, like DEI as a person, what it means to you, and how do you think it impacts a career in consulting?
Diversity, right? I
Yes.
feel like diversity is very, very important in consulting. When you're consulting, the main thing is you're trying to find the root cause of a situation, right? Of an issue. You're trying to brainstorm and be innovative and bring the right solutions to the client, right? And it requires you to look at things in a different way than others will look at it, right? So diverse people bring that to a team. They're able to see things from a different angle based off of their experiences, from like life, and even from their culture, right? And I feel it's very important. It also increases revenue. It's been shown to increase revenue in companies when they hire more diverse people. It also shows like there's improved employee retention, because you have people staying within the company, right? Like people are staying in there, they're not trying to leave because they're experiencing like different cultures. Some people tend to love it. Some people, those that are initially like, you will find some people that initially hold back, right? Because
Yeah.
like, oh, this is a different person. But as time goes on and they warm up to it, they seem to enjoy that, you know? So it creates like an open culture that's like valued. And it's very, I feel like diversity is very, very important in an organization, especially in evolving organizations.
Okay. So Jessica, have you ever like faced a situation where diversity was not welcomed, like wherever you worked or studied? Like,
Yes, I would say yes. I feel like in every experience I've had, I've always experienced someone or some form of situation where diversity wasn't either diversity or inclusivity wasn't like encouraged, right? So you could have people that were diverse, but then their values or their contributions to the team weren't valued, right?
yeah,
I remember, I'm not gonna give like really big examples, but like even like sometimes like you initially, I used to be very conscious of my accent because I do have an accent, and I used to be very, very conscious to the point that it made me stutter, right? Because I would be afraid to say certain things because I would feel like even when I'm doing presentations, people are focusing on my accent instead of what I'm actually saying, right? But
yeah,
then like working on myself, like gaining that confidence and identifying with yourself that, hey, this is your experience. It's okay to be different. It's okay to have a different background. It's okay. It makes you stronger. I mean, I'm not saying it makes you better than other people, but it gives you a different perspective of life, which is highly valued. So you should own that. And when people do not accept it, just, I mean, like sometimes you might have to like move on to find other jobs or other situations where you get to work like with people who are like diverse friendly or more inclusive, right?
okay.
there was a situation, I don't know if this is really, there was a situation, one of my roles where I remember someone said, yeah, like you're lucky to have this job because wait, because of one, your skin color, your accent, and the fact that you're a woman, right? So the person actually identified everything that was different about me, right? And I mean, during those situations, like those times, it was difficult for me to like accept that, like, hey, like this person is actually like saying things that are really hurtful towards
Yeah.
towards me, and like it's kind of like a toxic environment. But also try making sure you speak up, like, hey, this isn't right, you know. If they continue to do so, like making sure you report it, like to them, report it up to HR. Do not tolerate it, and encourage your coworkers to not tolerate it, because anytime a coworker is quiet when someone is not being inclusive, that their silence means complacency, right? Like you're okay
Yeah.
with it. So just making sure that you speak up, and then find allies within the organization. And allies within, like for me, I found someone within the organization who was very inclusive, who was very open to diverse people, and would see you for who you are, right? Find those allies, talk to them. Maybe they might have a different approach on how to approach the other person. They might even brainstorm things like, hey, what I said, was it really wrong, or was it crazy or something? And they might give you a different input, right? And
Yeah.
if it's like something that's like, find allies. I'll also encourage you to like report it. All will stand up when the time is right, you know?
Yeah.
So,
I feel that it's incredible that you stood up, like, and spoke up against someone who said that to you, because it's so unfair. And
yes.
coming from India, I could relate to that, how
And
people
as a
like judge
diverse
you.
person,
Yeah.
yeah, as a diverse person, you have to remember that you would always find people that are always going to be either openly not receptive to you, or be like behind your back, they will not be receptive to you. But the thing is, be okay with yourself, and be that it's bound to happen. How do I navigate this circumstance? Like sometimes having those difficult conversations are necessary, right, to move the team together. And sometimes when you address those, it bonds the team, it makes them closer, right? And if you're
So,
not, move on.
yeah. So while we're actually looking for jobs and like during the recruitment process, how do we understand a company's like and assess a company's culture and talent acquisition strategy? Like, how do we understand if this is the kind of the environment that we want to work in, or if they're inclusive, or
I feel like with bigger organizations, it's easier to tell if they're evolving. So organizations that are more inclusive and that are open, receptive to diverse people are evolving organizations. And when I say evolving organizations, they tailor everything that they do, their processes to the demands of the population. They know that, hey, there's a diverse group within this country. So let's make sure the people we hire represent those exact groups. And then even if maybe they don't have enough diverse people, they are inclusive, they're working towards diversity, so they are trying to accept, right, they accept people's thoughts, like minorities thoughts, and then they incorporate it into their processes, right? They have a culture where it's like accepting to, even when I remember this is like a very like fragile thing that George Floyd it was the George Floyd shooting. I remember this is really outstanding. It was very impressive to me, like at Booz Allen, where like they had people like, if you were really like affected by it, they sent out an open letter that, hey, if you've been affected, or you feel like after watching that video, like you felt like um stressed out, like they had open therapy sessions for that. They created like workshops where people would talk openly about how to be more inclusive of your coworkers. And yet they talked about these situations in a professional and sensitive way, right? And the fact that of course people have different opinions, right? But what is one that is inclusive of everybody's opinion, right? Making sure that everybody's feelings are recognized. Yeah. So make sure you look for that. And that yeah, I'll just say like it's easier to tell in big organizations than smaller ones, because smaller ones they have like less team members, so it's hard to gauge right? But if you look at their past experience, their past performance, their past experience, like what they're talking about now, it gives you a sense, right? And now I feel like we have a lot of companies that are like diverse, even though they're diverse, they're not inclusive, right? So actually finding ways, like talking to some of their minorities on LinkedIn, finding them, hey, how's your experience here? Reach out to them, right? It's not everyone that's going to answer, but the people that are very passionate will answer and tell you, you know, how it is. And look at their turnover rates for minorities too.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah. Also, when we're actually preparing for the interviews themselves, do you think there's anything that these companies do not advertise in their websites or make like anything other than the obvious that is like really important when you prepare for the interviews?
Like when advertise for their on their websites, like what?
Like they talk about this is the kind of the people that they need, this is the kind of the work that they're doing, and this is what they're looking for. But is there anything that they do not like talk about, but still you feel like is important?
That I feel that it's important for them to talk about.
No, for important for you to know while preparing.
Uh, Let me see. I'm trying to think about this question. That's a good question.
Thank you.
So I'm trying to understand the question. So you're saying that like when you have like you go to an interview, you go to interview with a company, like is there something that they should be talking about? Is that
Is
what
there
you're
something that you should
asking?
keep in mind? Is there something that you, as someone who is like interviewing for this company, should keep in mind while appearing for the interviews?
Oh yeah. You keep in mind that thank you for explaining that. Keep in mind that the company, like you're meeting new people, right?
Yeah.
Other people might have different perspectives on like your experiences, right? And then it's difficult to navigate how the interview might go, right? But just keep in mind that it's okay to be who you are. Show up as your true authentic self, right? That was something that I struggled with. I wasn't bringing my A game, like and me not bringing my A game was because I wasn't showing up as my true authentic self. So you being true to yourself makes you bring your A game, right? So even when they ask you questions, you're more relaxed, you're able to answer. So make sure you keep that in mind, that no matter what, um, if you're true to yourself, you will be hired by the right companies, right? For example, one of like my boss now, she was just recently hired. She's a director of clinical consultant at S2N. When she was talking to me about how like when she joined, she was a bit nervous, right? When she went for the interview, she was a bit nervous because she was pregnant at that time, and she's also a woman, but she was pregnant at that time. She was kind of nervous about how it would go, right? But then seeing how like they were very openly receptive, right? Like she brought her true authentic self. She was open, and she told them the truth, like, hey, like, you know, I'm expecting, my family is growing, which is like great news. And they were open about it. They were very welcoming about it. So that shows like a true case of where if you show up as your true authentic self, the right company will say, hey, yes, you're welcome here. The company
Okay.
that you don't need to be in will tell you no, like, you know, or you wouldn't hear anything back. So that's crucial.
So rather than like pivoting your personality to suit a particular position, you should just be yourself, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you for the answers. Now, my friend and the co-director of the club, Mitra, is going to take over, and she has a few questions too.
Sure. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for being here today. So I think I loved what you're talking about, bringing, who you are to the interview process, but I think sometimes it's very intimidating to do exactly that. So,
It is.
especially as you
It is.
mentioned, some of us struggle, let's say, with English not being our first language and, communicating, or just sometimes it's how we look, and we worry that the other person is not taking us seriously. So, do you have any tips or strategies as to how to what to do in that moment when you feel like someone, like you're facing implicit bias, right? Like if you feel like this interviewer is not taking you seriously, or is not paying attention to what you're saying because they're biased towards you. How do you tackle that kind of situation?
That's a good question. So typically like in those situations where like it's implicit, you have a feeling that it's implicit biases, right? Or like there's some form of microaggression, right? Like try to if you focus too much on it, right? Like this person is being biased towards you, you will lose your train of thought, right? So focus on what's at hand, like what you're trying to deliver, your product, right? Like what you're trying to say or what you're trying to deliver, and try to bring someone would say, I remember one of my mentors said, don't, like sometimes it's very difficult when you're in those situations, like it's kind of like you feel a flood of emotions which kind of like clouds you or impedes you, right? But talk about your experience, talk about your work that you've done, talk about what you're bringing to the table, right? Talk about like what you've done, right? So, and let your work speak for itself, as opposed to like focusing on what the person is seeing. Eventually, hopefully the person might come around. If they don't, then again, it shows you're not supposed to be in that company. Like I think I feel like as minorities, it's very important to find companies that are very inclusive and that very accepting of who you are, because that's the only way you can progress in your career. That's the only way you can thrive as an employee, right? That's the only way you can have good mental health. So I know sometimes in the beginning it's hard, like being like right out of school, because you don't have a lot of choices, right? Even in those choices, weigh your pros and cons, right? If eventually you get accepted or you get the job, right? Weigh your pros and cons. Okay, I know this company is not as inclusive and as diverse, right? For the meantime, right? Let me see if I can, since I have no other options, what are some skills I can gain from there, right? Maybe, I know it's hard to say, like maybe being there, it kind of like will help you develop some other skills. And as you develop those skills, make sure you have a plan in place to transition to a different company that's more inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah,
I hope I was able to address that tough question.
yes, no, absolutely. Because I have been in these situations where I feel like someone isn't taking what I'm saying seriously. And it's very hard for me in that moment to like you said, clear
Yeah,
my head and get rid of those emotions and still do
it's
a great
hard.
job. It is so challenging. And hopefully someday we
Yeah,
will
and try
have
to
to do
practice.
this. Yes.
Yeah, and practice. If practice before your interview, right? So in case like there's something that goes like haywire or something that goes off, or the interviewer is not as receptive, you've practiced, right? That means you're bringing your A game, you're bringing your best foot forward, right? So take your mind off that person for a second and focus on what you're actually saying or what you're bringing to the table. Yeah, I know it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, no, but I think it's a very, very, like what you told us is excellent advice that I'm going to try and put to practice
Yeah.
next time, anytime I have to interview. So let's say now we have interviewed, we've found an amazing, a very inclusive, firm to work at. What does
Job.
the, day-to-day look like? So can you tell us a little bit about what you did at Booz Allen as a healthcare consultant, and what you currently do, and how you made that transition?
Yes. So at Booz Allen, when I initially started, I started off in a different project actually. I was working for the VA. So we're working on state veteran homes. And coming to Booz Allen, I was kind of scared to ask questions, right? But then again, it's a very inclusive company. It's like they accept and they always challenge you to be the best that you can be, right? So eventually, like they realize that, hey, Jessica, sometimes if you're doing work and that you're not sure about the end product, right? Make sure you ask questions, right? So it helped me ask questions. So initially, for the VA project, I would like develop like processes for how we could deliver aid to COVID-19, deliver aid to state veteran homes, right? As a result of COVID-19. And at the DoD, it's a different culture, right? Because it's military. So you have people that are really structured, right? So my day-to-day activity was very different. So from there, we had a lot more meetings where you had like a all hands meeting with everybody on the project. I think it was like 400 people on the project at that time. And we would talk about like the current status updates of the projects right on the call. And then after you would break out to your individual like teams, right? And then within that, like certain days, I'll talk to my clients to see what was going on with the deployment status, make sure that I was reporting it out if there was a risk involved to like my deployment manager. So it was a lot of talking to clients, client-facing work, right, and working with data. So I would get data. We had an engineering team that would send. It was how do you call it? It was like basically an Excel spreadsheet that had a lot of questions I would ask the MTFs, like as to how many devices they have and stuff, like how many devices they have or equipment, right? And we'll analyze that to see if there were gaps in it. So if there were gaps in it, we'll talk to the people on the site to make sure that they knew that and what we could do, right? In that case, like make sure they had all the resources they needed. So that's my day-to-day at Booz Allen. Basically, at S2N, it's different. It's in some way because it's construction, right? So it's a totally different field. So you're working with contractors, you're working with different vendors, you're working with the architects, you're working with developers, right? You're also working with the client itself. So it's a lot of different stakeholders that you talk to. You have to make sure that you're mitigating risk, you're talking to them, make sure that they're okay with your status updates, you're providing, if there's any status update on the construction side, right? For me, I have to like communicate it to my client, right? So like, yeah, that's my day-to-day activity. So again, the similarities are like both of them for S2N, you look at equipment that's going to be deployed in the hospital and then make sure, for example, like you look at equipment that's going to be deployed in the hospital and make sure that the hospital has a right exact number of equipment, which is also similar to the DoD. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. So it's typically 9 to 5. Yeah.
That's 9 to 5 sounds great.
And sometimes, I mean, like, so the thing is like you have to set your boundaries, right? So
Right.
sometimes you have days where you have to, of course, you have to work longer hours
Mhm.
due to the demanding nature of the project, which is fine. But make sure you set your boundaries in such a way that you have a healthy mental state that you can do your job and be best at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know just like talking about day to day, something that crossed my mind is, you spoke about how diversity is so important in consulting because we are bringing different perspectives and different experiences that can help solve a problem. But do you face any challenges, let's say, while being placed on projects that, or, working in a team, because we work so much as teams as consultants. Was there a time that you had a more hostile, a team member, and how do you go about dealing with, situations like that when you're placed in such projects?
So with with engineers, right? It's male dominated, right? So you're going to work with a lot of men sometimes. And often, I mean, sometimes you have situations where even when you're talking in meetings, it's kind of like they're not listening, right? They're talking over you and stuff like that, right? So in those situations, like making sure, like initially I would, whenever it's something like that would happen, I'll just be quiet and not talk again, right? And just forget, like push my idea to the small corner, right, that it is in. But then I guess like with experience, like you learn to like drive back. Like if someone talks over you or something like that, like even after the meeting, having a side conversation like, hey, like, I really didn't appreciate it when you did this, but next time, like, you know, you should be more receptive or maybe listen to what I'm saying, right? And let's all collaborate together, right? Maybe creating that. And over time, and if I actually, like, over time, as people see your work, right? I always say that as people see your work ends up speaking for itself. So people begin to value your opinion, right? Even in meetings, they solicit, hey, Jessica, what do you think? And then you're able to talk, right? Initially, it's always hard initially. With a new team, it's always going to be hard, right? But making sure you always bring your best foot forward. Your work speaks for itself. I know it's hard for us women out here, but making sure, hopefully we're hoping that in the future we won't have to prove ourselves, right? But now these are times where you have to, like, make sure your work speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you're so right, and that really like brings me to my next question. You know, as you know, a woman of color, for example, when I look at a lot of these consulting firms and especially look at, you know, who's on the upper management, I don't necessarily see a lot of times someone like me being represented. And it always worries me that the upward mobility for anyone who's underrepresented
Yeah.
is still
Yep.
challenging, right? So, you know, I wanted, if you could like comment a little bit about any challenges that you might have faced when it comes to like upward mobility and, you know, yeah, I honestly don't know if there's a solution or, but I would love to hear just
I feel like it's
comments.
always murky waters in those situations, right? Especially like sometimes working in organizations where you don't see a representation of you up there. And sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes you might see a representation, but they're not as helpful, you know. And unfortunately, it happens too. But in those areas, like even starting from your direct, like the person you directly report to, make like talking to the person, like eventually, like after some time when you work with them and you develop a working relationship with them, and as time goes on you realize that they're not as inclusive or they're not creating opportunity. I always say voice out your opinions, like, hey, I would love to work on this part because I'm really passionate about it. Try to get to that point where you're comfortable, right, and you establish that relationship. But if it's not going that way, it's very important because to talk, be open about it, voice it out. Booz Allen has this culture where if your career manager isn't being helpful to you, you can always request to have the career manager change, which is great, right? So if you have someone that like you're reporting to that it's not going well, because if it's that person is supposed to advocate for you, they're supposed to be the person that defends you or puts you in a line, in a spotlight where you can be able to do your work and do things that you're passionate about to grow and thrive. So if that person is not doing that, you might have to have conversations with a person in a professional, respectful way that, hey, I would like to do this. I'm very passionate about this. If over time it's being ignored, you can request. I think you should request to have like request your displeasure, request, hey, this isn't working. I feel like our working relationship isn't working, or even to like your superior, hey, like I would like to have this person change, because it's very important. If the person doesn't advocate for you, it kind of like stifles your career growth, right? So you always have to make sure. I know you don't have a lot of hand in that, but making sure you develop those relationships. If it's not going well, make sure you find ways to like switch managers, right? And also find people outside, allies outside, mentors outside that will give you good sound advice. People that have been there before, not just people who haven't been there, but people who have been there before, who've been through it and who are able to offer willingly, right, advice on those situations. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so I'm learning the importance of allyship and mentorship and how it's so important to have the right people. But you know, I want to try and understand what, you know, what do you think DEI will look like in consulting in the next 5 to 10
In the
years?
future.
Yeah, do you think it's changing? Do you think it's getting better for some of us who are aspiring to become consultants?
I think it's getting better. I think it's getting better. I think there's hope, right? Because you see a lot of women, you see a lot of not just women, diverse minorities being moved up in these positions where they've actually worked for it and they have the skills to deliver, right? So I believe that there is hope, and we should, and our job is to make sure we find those companies where we're able to thrive, that we can eventually get there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering my questions so patiently.
You're welcome.
It's so insightful. And I think we're going to open the floor for our audience today and, give them a chance to really ask any questions that we haven't covered, or any, if there's anything that they want to learn more from you. So to our
Sure.
audience, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box. Or if you're interested, please raise your hand and voice your question.
Is everyone shy?
I hope not.
I can chime in with a question that I think comes up a lot.
Sure.
For people, especially international students, one of the hardest things they have to navigate is visa requirements and certain, tiers of hoops that they have to jump through to even be able to work where they want to work.
Yeah.
What
Yep.
things have you either experienced directly, or maybe people that have experienced, like, how would you recommend people go about learning which firms are more accepting to international applicants, and I guess what the easiest path for people looks like?
So I've come to realize, and that this was by way of my little brother. So my little brother currently works at Meta. I was about to say Facebook, Meta, right? His background is in data science and computer science, undergrad computer science, grad data science. For him, I feel like being in like areas like the Midwest, he and also in places like South Dakota, where it's hard to retain like good talent because most of the people are traveling to big cities, right? It's easier for them to get. It was easier for him to get a job right there in his field that was more receptive about doing that H-1B process for him and getting his green card eventually, right? So like finding places, I mean, unfortunately, international students, like finding organizations, even startups, right, that are new, that might be more open and receptive to you, right? Navigating those difficult waters first, right? And then eventually after you get your experience, this is really bad to say, like getting your experience and then moving on to like what things that you're actually passionate, or companies that you're really passionate about. So like in the case of my little brother, he worked for a smaller firm. It was a consultant firm. It was actually a healthcare consultant firm. It was easier for him to get into that role. He started it off as an internship, right? As an intern, and then was able to work his way there. He worked there for 5 years, 5 to 10 years, right? And then I think after a year or so of working as an intern, they were open to him being an employee there, and then he moved up, and eventually like during those times they were able to file for him to be a green card holder. So going to places that are like far away from everything, unfortunately, sometimes. I hope that was like, maybe I was a bit too honest, but hey.
No, that's very helpful. I mean, honestly, if it was me, I mean, South Dakota's beautiful. So I see that as
It is.
a win-win. Yeah.
It is. A lot of people don't like it because it's very cold.
Yeah, it doesn't get very cold, but
yeah.
awesome.
So
Thank you.
places like that. Yeah, you're welcome.
I think I have a follow-up to Matt's question is,
Sure.
in your experience, do you know if that's a good time to bring up, for example, like that you're an international student, this is your visa status, and this is when you require sponsorship, like when is an appropriate time to have that conversation with a recruiter?
Usually, so I guess like for me, like usually you should, when you apply for jobs, I'm not very, very familiar with that aspect, right? But when you're applying for jobs, like if you look at their, I guess I would say their past performance. When I say past performance, like people that they've hired that international, right? And see like follow up to see like the process that they went through, right? And I guess like initially that will make you more comfortable to interview with them. And then during that interview, like maybe after your first round of interview, your first round of like preliminary open phone interview, right? And you go into the office to do like the face-to-face interview, maybe at the end, like mention your status, like, hey, and then some jobs will openly tell you, hey, we only require US citizens to apply for this position. So that automatically these jobs aren't ones you qualified for. But maybe if it's like a role that you're really excited about, like call to find out. There's the worst thing that someone can tell you is no, right? So just call to find out that, hey, even though I see that this role says US citizens only, are there any roles that are like similar to this that you think I'll be a good candidate for, right? Because I'm like an international student. Yeah. So it's more about your research, like making sure you're doing your research. I know job hunting is hard, but fortunately for you guys, you're at Hopkins, and Hopkins has a lot of great resources and alumni. So you should reach out to the alumni members too. I was going to say the career fairs, go to those career fairs, talk to the people there, the different companies. There was a STEM career fair, and that's even how I got into Booz Allen, because there I met people from Booz Allen. I met this man, he's called Robert Silverman. He was very great. He spearheaded he was a firm's African American sponsor, right? So he was an ally. He is an ally, and he was great. And talking to him more, asking him questions, that created opportunities. So don't miss those career fairs. Go to it. Put your best foot forward. Dress professionally. Ask questions, and have your resume ready in hand to pass along.
So I have a question in terms of resume. I have really no work experience. So
Right.
for my resume, I supplemented that with project experience from classes and from my college. I have done, I've been VPs of clubs, and I've been a mentor for a mentor program. Is there any way, is that good enough?
Yeah.
Is something to change?
No, I think those are great. Those are great experiences that you have, and they're all valuable. And I'm very sure in all those roles that you played in those different, how do you call it? Be it an internship, be it a VP of a club or anything, those are things that will speak to how much you were able to contribute to a company or be an asset to them. So I should say, yeah, put them on there, especially if you don't have any actual work experience, like hired for work experience.
How about for like class projects? Like, I've led a couple of class projects. I'm currently working on a project with an NIH employee right now. So is that useful to put on?
Yeah, I would say those are useful, but try to highlight the ones that are very that you believe are very impactful, like the ones that you're talking about, the one with the NIH colleague, like actually write it, put that one on your resume and put what you actually did, right? And that's very that's on the impactful experience. Don't put just any class projects, but ones that you believe are very impactful. So make sure your resume is also succinct, but also it's straight to the point, and then it has good examples, right, of things that you've done.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Jessica, I have a question from Divya. So she's an engineering student, and she wanted to know how to go about the end-to-end development of a medical hardware-based product.
How to go about what?
The end-to-end development of a medical device or a hardware product.
How to get it's like it keeps going in and out. I'm so sorry. I had something about development of medical devices.
Yes. How to go about that particular process.
Oh, how to go about those classes?
That process of developing a product.
Of developing a product, a medical product.
Yes.
Huh. That's like, I would say that's really out of my work experience. I don't have much to say about that. But again, I'll say research, right? Go to a good place to start is FDA, because they have a set of requirements that you have to fulfill, right, for those processes, right? So make sure like you make sure you know the class of the medical device, right? And make sure like you're following the requirements that they have. And so you can start off with requirements. Start off with like finding people or individuals that are currently in that process of medical device development, doing research, right, and talking to those people. And I'm sure those people are able to, this is hard for me to say, because I feel like sometimes when you reach out to people do not respond, right? But reaching out to, maybe even if you can reach out to 10 people, reach out to as many people as you can. Eventually one person is going to respond. Ask for a coffee chat and then talk to them about, hey, what's the process? Can you please educate me on this? Like, make sure you go into the interview or to the coffee chat prepared with questions, right, with an agenda in mind, so that way you don't deviate from what you really want to have answered. I hope that helped.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for all your insights, especially about DEI and other things about consulting. They were extremely helpful. And just as like a, leaving kind of parting message, I would love to hear some words from you about how we can be not just, doing work.
I think I lost you for a quick second.
Yeah, I think, if you could have some parting words about how we can all be better DEI allies, because I think in addition to, working to improve DEI, it's important to show allyship for people that are coming after us. So I think it would be great if you could, kind of end this hour on some parting words on that topic.
Yeah, I'd say always for DEI, like diversity and inclusivity. I can't say this word for some reason, like being inclusive, right? Make sure like you're always looking beneath the surface, right? Always make sure you're reaching out to the people that different, making sure that they're having a good experience, right? Sometimes it's easier to get buried in work, but then it's good to like lift your head up and look around and see the people that really need it and reach out to them, right? To make them feel welcome, to make them feel more inclusive, because everyone is going through things. But then when you take the extra time to talk to them and represent them as allies, right? It goes a long way. And when I say allies, anytime I say allies, I'm referring to people that are not even minorities, right? Those are your allies, right? And then you as a person that's diverse, like using your experience and talking to them, seeing how you can apply it towards them to make sure that they feel welcomed, and encourage everyone to bring their true authentic self, because that's the only way a workplace can thrive, right? I'm not saying like be unprofessional or anything, but I know you all understand what I mean by bringing a true authentic self. Don't feel like you have to hide a part of your culture to be more accepting. Own that piece. It's your experience, right? Own it. Be you, right? It's hard to say, but then it's like a muscle. The more you practice working that muscle, the better it becomes, right? Initially it'll be hard, but then as you continue to practice to bring authentic self, after some time it becomes second nature. So just look around, reach out to people, help out as you can. And if anyone has any questions, they can always email me too. I'll be happy to help.
Thank you so much. Thank you for really inspiring a lot of us and giving us hope that things are going to get better and how to deal with a lot of situations that might come up. It's I will make sure that I pass on this
It's not
information.
easy.
I know it's definitely not easy, but I think by talking to more people, we can sensitize them and hopefully pass on some of these things that you taught us today to as many people as we can. So thank you for
and remember to always pursue. Sorry, I interrupted. I was just saying that remember to always pursue people that are open to you and accept you and challenge you to be open, to be your true authentic self. So make sure you're always pursuing those relationships, being around that, because the more you do that, the better you are at even practicing being yourself in places that are not receptive of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now it's at the mark of the hour. So thank you for joining us here today. And yeah, we hope that we can stay in touch and, invite you to more things in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Caroline has my email.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. Caroline has my email, so if you have any questions, just reach out to her. I'm sure she'll be happy to share it.
Thank you, and
thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
So much, Jessica. Thank you.
Bye-bye.